So thank you all so much for being here. This is a special edition panel that we have for you tonight, where we are celebrating our people of color authors and their own voices stories. This was actually Ann Shade's idea, to give credit where it's due. We wanted to give our authors a platform to share their stories, especially around the holidays, because I think it's a opportunity to support community and family wherever you find it. So I hope you enjoy these readings and the Q&A afterwards. I'm going to hand it over to Frederick Smith as the moderator.
All right, thank you so much, Sandy, and thank you so much, Bold Strokes Books, for hosting all of us today. My name is Frederick Smith. I use he, him pronouns, and I am also an author on Bold Strokes Books. However, today I'll be serving in the role of moderator and facilitating all the readings. My three titles on Bold Strokes Books include Play It Forward, which came out in 2015, In Case You Forgot, which came out in 2019, and Busy Ain't the Half of It, which came out in 2021. I will not be reading today, but I do encourage you to take a look at my spot on Bold Strokes Books, as well as everyone else who's on the panel today, to hear about what they have to offer. And hopefully you find something that you can read and or give to someone during this time of the year. Our voices is really important, opportunity for us to share from our perspectives, our unique perspectives, what our writing means to us, how we want support from, Bold Strokes Books, readership, and from your friends and family and things like that. And so we're really excited about being with you this evening. We will be doing 4 readings, and the order of the readings will be by the order of first name. So our first reader will be Andrew Huerta, then followed by Ann Shade, then followed by Lauren Melissa Ellzey, and then followed by Sandra Santiago. Following each one of the readings for about 4 or 5 minutes, there'll be a short commentary. We'll ask one question. And then once everyone has done their readings and we've done short commentary with each one, we'll do some larger community conversation as well. We encourage you to put questions in the chat or observations, or even just, use your Zoom to give virtual snaps, because we all know that as artists, we like to receive affirmation and confirmation that the work that we do is being received positively by you out there. So again, my name is Frederick Smith. I'm located in San Francisco, California. And if you all want to do an icebreaker with yourselves before we do a reading, maybe you can put in the chat where you're zooming in from today. So without further ado, we're going to turn it over to our first reader, who is Andrew Huerta, who is visiting us on Zoom via Arizona. And so Andrew, the Zoom stage is yours.
Okay, good evening. I'm Andrew Huerta. So I'm from Tucson, Arizona, and when I'm not writing, I'm teaching technical and professional writing at the University of Arizona. I'm an assistant professor of practice there. So today I'm going to read from my book. So it's called A Different Man. So it's a collection of short stories that focuses on the lives and experience of mainly gay men. The collection includes 13 stories that follow the life trajectory of gay men, as each one deals with an adventure and or challenge at a different stage of his or their life. So as the stories in the collection progress, so too does the age of each protagonist in the story. So today I'd like to share with you an excerpt from my story, Good Help. The story is fiction and focuses on Linda. She's a 15-year-old girl searching for a dress for her quinceañera. She just entered the dress shop where her cousin Diego works, and he and the shop's owner, Sophie, will help Linda find the dress. While there, Linda has to deal with a few customers. So I'll start with her interaction with a mother who is there shopping with her teenage daughter. So this is part of my story of Good Help. Excuse me. Yeah. Hi, sir. The blonde woman stopped a short distance in front of them. My daughter wants to try on that other dress you just showed her. She looked at Diego. I think my daughter wants to try on a size 8. Size 8, Diego said. The last dress she tried on was a 6. Well, the woman said, just get her the dress and we'll see how it fits. The woman turns her back and walks over to another rack of dresses. She flips through them quickly, and the hangers make a sharp noise as she drags them along the metal rack. Have a seat, Diego said. My mom should be here soon, so Sophie and I will help you with all of this. Let's wait for her, and then we'll get started. Linda moved closer to the two sofas and noticed an elderly woman sitting at the far end of one. The woman had short, white hair combed neatly into a bun at the back of her head. She wore a heavy polyester suit that was light gray, and she stared out a large display window facing the front entrance. Her hands were folded down her lap, and she sat with her ankles crossed. The elderly woman didn't say a word or look at her, so Linda sat down at the opposite end of the other sofa. She didn't want to block the elderly woman's view out the front window. Linda gazed at the woman's blank expression. She leaned forward and picked up one of the magazines fanned out on the coffee table in front of her. She opened the heavy magazine on her lap. "Excuse me." Linda looked up and saw the blonde woman standing at the other end of the coffee table. "Do you have this in a size 8? Linda turned her head from side to side and realized the woman was talking to her. She laughed at the woman. I don't work here," Linda said, shaking her head. She focused on the magazine, but she could feel her throat begin to tighten as her head began to throb. Overwhelmed, she thought to herself once again, and she focused on her breathing. "You mean the only one working here now is that little man?" The blonde woman draped the dress over one of her arms and looked around the store. "Little man?" Linda replied, clamping her teeth tightly together. She purposely avoided looking back at the blonde woman and instead stared at the elderly woman across from her. She exhaled slowly. "Like I said, I don't work here." The elderly woman continued to stare forward. "The owner of this shop is Sophie Marino. I think she's here right now, so if you ask the little man, whose name is Diego, I'm sure he can find her for you." Linda moved her head as slowly as possible, turned and looked up at the blonde woman. She gave the woman her best fake smile. "Oh, Emily," the blonde woman said. She looked away from Linda at the young woman who'd emerged from the dressing room. The young woman wore a long white dress. The dress hung from her shoulders and the hem dragged on the ground all around her. Linda tilted her head and noticed the young one was also wearing white pumps. She needs a size 6 petite, Linda thought. Diego and Sophie stood directly behind the young woman and looked at her from head to toe. Sophie looked over at Linda, and Linda smiled and waved hello. "Honey, that dress is beautiful, isn't it, Mom?" The blonde woman cupped her hands in front of her. She looked down at the elderly woman, who continued to stare out the front window. The blonde woman moved over and sat down on the sofa. "Come over here and show Grandma your dress." She motioned for Emily to move in front of the coffee table. The blonde woman placed her hand on the elderly woman's arm and leaned closer. "Mom, look at Emily's dress. Isn't it pretty?" The grandmother turned and stared at Emily. "It is pretty," she said, "but it doesn't fit. It's too damn big." Her voice was quiet and calm, and she stared down at the hem of the dress. "Oh, they'll fix it," the blonde woman said. She gripped the elderly woman's forearm and turned to Sophie and Diego. "How long will the alterations take?" We don't do alterations here," Sophie said as she stepped forward. "And I'm sorry, but that's the last dress we have in that style. I can give you the phone number of a seamstress we work with. Her shop is just down the street." "You mean you're not a seamstress?" The blonde woman sighed. She looked away from Sophie and stared over at Diego. Do you sew? Can you fit the dress for us?" "I'm a designer and I can sew, but I don't do alterations. The woman we have does excellent work, so we can give you her card or we can start trying on some other dresses." The blonde woman shook her head and looked over at Linda. Linda rolled her eyes back down towards the magazine. "Do you really love that dress, honey?" The blonde woman asked her daughter. "Yes," Emily said. "The cotillion is in 3 weeks, Mom, and I have to have a white dress." The mother held up her hand. "Then we'll get it fixed, honey, don't worry." She looked away from Emily and stared over at the elderly woman. Emily picked up the front of her dress and walked back towards the dressing rooms. Sophie and Diego followed. "I can't believe they don't do alterations here," the mother sat up straight in the sofa and leaned away from the grandmother. Linda could tell that she was staring over at her, probably looking for some kind of sympathy, but Linda continued to study one of the pictures in the magazine. "Now I have to call this other woman and go someplace else for fittings? I just can't believe that one of them can't do the alterations. I mean, why do people like that work here if they can't do the alterations themselves?" The mother looked over at the grandmother, who shook her head in agreement. She added, "You just can't find good help these days." So that's a part of my story. And then Linda goes on with Diego to deal with these other interesting comments around the shop around them. So that is an excerpt from my story, Good Help. again from my book, A Different Man.
All right. Thank you very much, Andrew L. Huerta. So glad to hear your story. And that was a wonderful reading. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about A Different Man, the collection of short stories, which is on Bold Strokes Books. I know it explores life for and about gay men at different ages and stages of life, including family expectations and cultural norms and religion and culture and all of that. Talk to us about the motivation behind the short story collection, and what do you think readers can expect from it? Should they buy it, gift it, and things like that?
So I think I've been particularly focused on short stories recently because of a large amount of work I have and problems I've been having with my family. So I've been trying to write a novel, but I just can't focus on it. So I find that these short stories or short essays really help me, get the stories out. And what I try and do in my stories is focus on that pivotal moment, like a challenge or an adventure. So what I think the collection really represents is, I think the stories are very varied, but entertaining. So, and I think this is most of the protagonists are kind of like me. So they're, it's a Latin, Mexican American voice of a gay man. So it's an underrepresented voice that we like to hear. And I really like to think that as these underrepresented voices emerge more and more, they become part of this American cultural modern day stories. So if you're interested in a collection that really is somewhat entertaining, but also has an underrepresented voice as the protagonists throughout the stories, then I think it is something you should either gift to someone who might enjoy it, or buy it yourself. So.
All right, thank you so much. And especially I think about short story collections being for people who may not have the time or attention to maybe devote to a full novel, but with a short story collection can decide, I'm going to read 1 or 2 stories today. I'll read 1 or 2 a couple days from now before they eventually get through. And so
it really is a quick read. I try to keep the stories short, so it has some rhythm to the collection as well.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Andrew L. Huerta. And we know that there'll be some information in the chat and a little bit about links to purchase any of the projects by any of the authors who are here today. And so again, thank you so much, Andrew. Our next reader who is going to come on screen is Ann Shade. And Ann Shade has been very prolific over the past couple of years with the numbers of anthologies and novels and prospective novels coming out. And so just really excited to have you and your voice here today at our own voices reading today.
Thank you.
Introduce yourself a little bit about who you are and tell us about what you're going to be reading from today.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ann Shade. I've been with Bold Stroke Books for about, 3 years now. I have 6 books under my belt. I've also worked with on an anthology with Bold Stroke Books called In Our Words, writings from BIPOC authors, and some other short stories and a couple of other anthologies. Today, I'll be reading from Love and Lotus Blossoms. And the reason I chose this one is not my most recent, but there's a Christmas scene in it, and it's close to the holidays. So I figured I would read from there. The character, Janess, is home for Christmas from college, and she's brought her girlfriend home to meet her family for the first time. And this is the scene, and her mother isn't too happy with Janess's life and her coming out and having a girlfriend. So things come to a head in this scene. Dinner went on without an issue. It wasn't until we all gathered in the living room for dessert around the tree and Denise announced she and Liz were having a baby that things took a turn. "What do you mean you're having a baby?" Uncle Frank asked excitedly. Denise took Liz's hand and smiled. "We both were inseminated, and mine took. Your first grandchild will be here in 6 months." Uncle Frank whooped loudly, pulled Denise up into a hug, released her, pulled Liz into one, took both their hands in his, tears of joy streaming down his cheeks. "I'm gonna be a grandpa." Denise nodded, reaching up to wipe away the tears. "The coolest grandpa on the planet." Denise was treated to a round of hugs from everyone except Mom, of course, who didn't bother hiding the look of disgust on her face. Then she opened her mouth and the ugliness came out. So you shot some stranger's semen up in you to impregnate you. You couldn't even go about that in a respectable way, Mom said. The room was suddenly quiet as we all looked at her in shock. How dare you, Uncle Frank said. What you do and say outside of here is your own business, but I will not allow you to come into my home and insult my child. Frank, you can't be serious. It's one thing to accept her lifestyle. It's another to accept her bringing children into that lifestyle. You're honestly fine with your grandchild never knowing who their father is, being raised by homosexual mothers. A child should have a mother and a father. Uncle Frank shook his head. A year's worth of therapy, and you're still the self-righteous, unforgiving woman you've been since Mom died. It's like she somehow possessed you and turned you into her. Denise is my child, and any child she brings into this world, no matter how it came about, will be loved just as much as she is. Look to your own home before you start criticizing mine. What's that supposed to mean? Mom said indignantly. You know damn well what I'm talking about, Uncle Frank glanced in my direction. The last thing I wanted at that moment was Mom's attention on me. She waved her hand dismissively. Janessa is just going through a phase. She was perfectly fine until she started spending time with those people next door. I had hoped while she was away at school and no longer under their influence that she would get over it, but it seems she needs more time. Until then, I don't care what she does, as long as she doesn't bring it into my house. Maya shifted closer to me and took my hand. I knew it was her way of showing me support, which, judging by the glare she gave me, made Mom angrier. Then I guess it's a good thing I'm staying with Jackie. Mom suddenly looked amused. You do realize that it's still my house. Jackie may be paying rent, but I'm paying the mortgage. Mom, Jackie said. Janet, Uncle Frank said. They spoke in unison, with various gasps of disbelief from others around me. Why do you hate me? I asked as my chest grew tight from fighting back the tears of anger and frustration that threatened to overwhelm me. I don't hate you, Janesse. I just don't respect the choices you're making with your life. I'm doing this because I love you and know that you're better than these base needs you let take over your life. Janet, being gay is not a choice or as simple as a base need. It's who we are. As hurtful as they are, I ignore your disapproving glances and snide comments, but I cannot sit back and watch you hurt your own daughter this way. You don't have to agree with how she lives, but you could at least show some compassion for who she is, Denise said. As much as I appreciated Denise coming to my defense, I was realizing that the more people defending me, the worse it made things with Mom. Janesse knows how I felt for some time now. She thinks she's grown enough to make her decision, and she's grown enough to deal with the consequences of it. How could you be so cruel to your own child? Maya said angrily. I squeezed her hand. Maya, don't. I'm sorry. I can't just sit here and watch her hurt you with each cruel word she spits out. She turned to face my mother. Miss Phillips, do you even know how wonderful, kind, and loving your daughter is? That she worries so much about what you think of her that just the thought of coming back here gives her the full-blown anxiety attacks. That she doesn't even trust the genuineness of her own feelings because you feed so much doubt in her. Like Denise said, you should be showing your daughter some compassion instead of cruelty. Tears streamed down her face as she gripped my hand so tight it was almost painful. Mom looked at Maya as if she wanted to slap her. Who do you think who do you think you are to tell me how to treat my daughter? What does your mother have to say about this? Have you even introduced Janesse to her? As a matter of fact, my mother doesn't agree with my life, but she loves me enough to accept that I'm happy, and that's all that matters. And my parents and the rest of my family have met and adore Janesse, Maya said. It wasn't said smugly. She was simply answering Mom's question, but I could tell by the look on Mom's face that she didn't like the answer. She looked around the room. Oh, I see. So I'm wrong for wanting my child to have a normal life, for wanting to see her married and have children of her own, for not wanting to parade my gay daughter around like she's a badge of honor. What has this world come to that so many people condone this? She looked at me. This isn't how I raised you. You dated that boy Dante for almost a year, which tells me you at least had some sense in you then. I'm sure once the excitement and novelty of this, she waved her hand between me and Maya, wears off, you'll come back to your senses once again. Until then, don't expect me to happily sit by and watch you ruin your life. She stood and left the room without so much as a goodbye.
Thank you, Anne. That was
Thank
a
you.
very intriguing scene.
Thank
I can
you.
imagine there's going to be a lot of holiday family reunions that may be similar to that and everything.
That's why I read it.
It definitely fits with the theme of thinking about our LGBTQ communities and memories of holidays, which we will talk about when we all come on as a panel after everyone reads. But I wanted to ask you, so like I said before, introductions, it seems like every time I look up, there's a new project, a new book, a new anthology coming out by you. And I know in the audience, we have some aspiring authors or maybe authors who are looking up to you as motivation for what they aspire to do. So can you talk to us a little bit about your productivity and what keeps you going from project to project? When do you write? And how do you know when a book is done and ready to submit to the team at Bold Strokes Books?
I guess I pretty much write every day. It may be for an hour, it may be for 3 hours, it depends. I work from home 3 days a week now, 3 to 4 days a week. So I have my setup where right in front of me right now is my personal stuff. If I turn this way, this is the work stuff. So I just do the swivel. So when I have time, I'm over, on this side, just typing away, trying to get it in as much as possible, since I do have the full-time job. And even at the office, when it's slow, and my boss is doing whatever he needs to do, I will kind of pull up my little USB drive and do some work there. So you have to try and get your writing in when you can, fit it in when you can get it in. And I never know when a project is done until I've gotten to the point where I'm looking at the words. And if I'm still going, I have to physically sometimes stop myself and then go back, read it and say, okay, what's a good stopping point? Because, and Sandy can attest to this, I can go on. This Love and Lotus Blossom almost went way too long. So know when to stop, know when okay, if there's too much story, know when to go in, be able to self-edit and clean up where you can, so that you're not turning in something that's, too much for a reader or even too much for your editor to like go through and say, okay, you know what, this is a lot going on.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And as you all can see in the chat, those of you who are watching us from wherever you are watching us from, in the chat, there are links for you to take a look at and purchase the books of all the authors who are reading tonight. There's a special discount for those who are watching this special event, and you'll also see it on the Bold Strokes Book website, 20% off until one day following the day of the live reading. So click on the links, take a look at some of the books, and thank you so much, Anne, for reading tonight. And for those of you who want to do a little icebreaker with everyone who's on, since we're all trying to be community with each other, maybe you can write in the chat who you are and where you're watching from tonight. So thank you, Anne. Coming up next, for our reading night is Lauren Melissa Ellzey, who is joining us. And hi, Lauren Melissa, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Good. I know you are. You're linking in from Brooklyn or the Bronx?
The Bronx.
The Bronx. Hey, the
Yeah.
Bronx. So thank you so much for being here today. Much appreciated. And we're so looking forward to hearing what you're going to be sharing with us today. So why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're going to be reading from, and we look forward to hearing what you're going to read today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm Lauren Melissa Ellzey. I am Black, multiracial, queer, and autistic. And whenever I write stories about neurodivergent queer teens of color, which are the kinds of stories that I never found on bookshelves when I was in high school. So today first, my first novel actually came out last February, released. It was Boy at the Window. But today I'm going to read from my upcoming book, Gimmicks and Glamour, which will be released in August 2023. And I picked this story because the protagonist is the closest to my own identities that I've ever written. So the story explores the experience of Ashley Harris, who is a biracial and bisexual high school senior. And she has a bad reputation at both school and home. What other people don't know is that she has a secret ability to see fairies and has been taking the blame for the fairies' mischief all this time. But she also can't really help but wonder if she sees fairies at all. So in this scene that I'm going to read today, Ashley is skipping class and waiting for her best friend, Karis, in the school restroom. And Karis is the only person who knows that Ashley sees fairies. Or Karis may just be playing along while playing with Ashley's feelings. But their rendezvous is about to be interrupted by an unwelcome visitor. These days, Karis and I take cover in the girls' restroom. We meet during fourth period on a pretty regular basis because I take government with a boring teacher that teaches straight out of the textbook, and Karis has Spanish, which she already speaks fluently. I'm waiting for her, seated on the automatic sink that likes to switch on every time I shift a bit to the left or the right. It's times like this that I wish I were one of those high schoolers that smoke cigarettes or vapes in the bathroom. A few hits of nicotine could help me pass the minutes while I wait for Karis. To be honest, the only reason I don't vape is because of her. The one time I took a pull off an e-cigarette, she yanked it out of my mouth and threw it straight in the trash. "You're literally inhaling iron into your lungs," she snapped. And since Karis never snaps, I figured I should listen to her. My parents could take a page from her book. All their shoulds pile up so high, I can't separate the good advice from the nagging. The door creaks open, and Karis breezes in with her mouth pursed in annoyance. When will those teachers ever realize that no one is listening to them in the first place? She says. Her jean jacket has slipped off her shoulder, revealing her bare arm. "I'd rather read a textbook than listen to a lecture," I say. I swing my legs back and forth, but she puts a hand on my knee, so I stop. She slides between my legs like she belongs there. She's the only one who I let this close to me when I'm sober. "I wasn't aware that you read the textbooks." I'd object, but she's right. Homework is just knowing how to make good guesses. Clever as always. Not half as clever as Karis, but I take the compliment. When I sit on the sink like this, she's at my eye level. Karis has this feel about her like she's taller than she actually is. She's a head shorter than me. My thigh grazes her jeans, which are rough against my skin. "Did you see any unexpected visitors before I arrived?" she asks. My eyes dart to the corners of the bathroom, to the shadows cast by the stalls. "No, but I wasn't looking." "So what are we doing this weekend?" she asks, because Karis never has any plans unless her parents are dragging her somewhere. The door creaks open again, and Jasmine Bennett saunters in. Just our luck. She sizes me up, and like someone eyeing an open trash bag on the curb. Without a word, she locks herself into a stall. "Need some privacy, princess?" I say, because her stuck-up silent treatment grinds my gears. "Sorry to break up your makeout session," she snaps back. Karis shakes her head, and I take her hint to back down. Jasmine is the kind of popular girl that watches too many teen movies and thinks that everyone in the school worships her. Truth is, half the student body probably doesn't even know her name. What they do know is that she's the only girl at Hackley who can pull off red lipstick. She wears the same fire engine shade every day, like a siren wailing, "Look at me." Jasmine flushes and steps out the stall with the lipstick tube in hand. She smears on an extra layer. Her face is perfectly symmetrical, and I'm convinced that's the only reason she was nominated for homecoming court. Either that, or the senior class was too scared of her to leave her name off the ballot. "How are things going with Brad?" I ask in my most innocent voice. Given that her now ex-boyfriend told the entire football team about our drunk hookup last spring break, she'll get my point. Our tete-a-tete took place during one of their many infamous breakups. "Feel free to dine on my sloppy seconds," she says. I'm a millisecond away from hopping off the sink, but Karis presses her palm into my thigh. a gentle reminder that another suspension might lead to a full-blown expulsion. Despite whatever the guidance counselors might believe, I do hope to graduate in June. Scamper along, I say through gritted teeth. I'll leave you two to whatever it is that I interrupted. Her purse hits the door on her way out. She didn't even wash her hands. I'm left wondering how she and I grew up going to all the same schools, how we used to play on the same tennis team. Friendship isn't forged by proximity. Jasmine made it clear that we weren't meant to be long ago, but that's a story for another day. One day, I'll smear that lipstick all over her face. I say, Karis smirks. Not worth your time, sweetheart. Karis is also the only person I'd ever let get away with calling me sweetheart. Everyone probably thinks that we've been shacking since middle school, and no one would believe that we've never so much as kissed. I don't even know if Karis has kissed anyone for that matter, guy or girl. One look at her, and anyone would think she could nab whoever she wanted. I've never chased anyone, and she's never broached the topic with me. So I figure that's a line we aren't crossing. Tell me what we're doing on Saturday, she says. She'll go anywhere I ask her to go, but I'm never sure who's the one leading. She could stay all by herself, and maybe that would suit her just fine.
Thank you so much, Laura and Melissa. That was wonderful. And I just have to tell you my own personal compliment. I really appreciated and loved your reading voice and the cadence and everything in which you read. It came alive for me. And so thank you so much for that. I'm going to ask you one question, especially since you focus a lot of your work on writing queer teens of color, young adults, new adults, and things like that. And so like recently in the news, we have had, we've seen in the news, local school boards, libraries, city and state legislatures really trying to censor and erase the voices of LGBTQ and BIPOC authors. I was wondering, what are some of your thoughts about that, especially thinking about some of the audiences that you write to, for, and about? And then why do you think it's important for you, for us, for the readers who are listening and watching us today to continue to support writing for and about young adult queer characters?
So I guess first off, I would say that erasing books will never erase identities. And so censoring LGBTQ BIPOC stories only for teens only erases their ability to feel community and belonging. And that is completely detrimental to all people's mental health, but especially these young people who feel like they don't have as much autonomy, and in many ways don't have as much autonomy over their lives and their choices. So I am, of course, 100% against censoring any LGBTQ BIPOC fiction, any fiction really in general. Definitely really passionate about that and about having representation in stories. When I was growing up, there were never really any LGBTQ books on the shelves of my libraries that I frequented. And the only BIPOC stories I saw on the shelves were ones that were like historical fiction. And historical fiction is great, but it was really hard to imagine myself in the shoes of maybe someone in the 1800s. I wanted to know about and experience stories that were reflections of what I was going through. And I think that that's extremely important for young people to have mirrors, especially if they are living in secret about any of their identities or hiding or feeling like they need to hide. To open up a book and read about someone who maybe isn't hiding, or read about someone who is hiding just like them and just as scared, can really, I believe, save lives.
All right, thank you so much. And so wonderfully put and stated. Yes, all of our books are about representation and about saving lives. And so we hope that all of you who are watching us today will hit those links in the chat, explore or pre-order or buy previously released novels and projects by everyone who's here on the screen with us. Thank you so much, Lauren, Melissa. We'll be back with you in just a minute with the full panel. But now I'd like to welcome to the Zoom stage Santiago, who is joining us from Florida. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Wonderful, wonderful. And so happy you could be with us today to share from your work. You too are another author who I've been watching on Bold Strokes Books, who is always putting something out and new and exciting. And so thank you so much for your productivity and for adding to the LGBTQIA plus canon of literature and everything. We're going to turn it over to you to talk a little bit about who you are, what motivates your writing, and to also share some reading from your project. So introduce yourself to the people out there and tell us about what you're going to read from, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much. Again, my name is Sandra Santiago. My pronouns are he, him. I have been honored and grateful to be working with Bold Strokes Books for the last almost 3 years now. I have 2 books out with Bold Strokes. My first novel, Best of the Wrong Reasons, and then my second novel, which I'll be reading from, One Verse Multi. My third novel comes out in February, and that is called The Speed of Slow Changes. So I'll be reading from One Verse Multi today. I think I was hoping to go for something a little bit more festive. And so I picked a party scene from this book that I think is wonderful and speaks well to the way I approach multi-diverse groups and friendships and community and that sort of thing. So hopefully it communicates that. And thank you. For as much as we achieved, we were exhausted. Hugo decided to give us the day off. I told him to throw a party in our common room to celebrate. To my surprise, he agreed. It was weird at first, having the data team in the lab, but it was nice to just be people for once. I'm very proud of everyone here. I think we've pushed the envelope our respected fields. I have no regrets selecting everyone I did for this team. And I know we are an honor to our company, to each other, and to ourselves, Hugo toasted. We cheered and sipped whatever was in our glass. I can't wait until we actually get data we can use, Hugo said, more quietly to the 3 of us standing in his vicinity. It was Tamar, Kiki, and I. Luca, Wei, and Mason were picking at the food tables across the room. Hopefully it answers Dawn's questions, Tamar said, with only a small amount of bitterness. I think it might answer more questions than that, Kiki said. What do you mean? I asked. I think it might answer Luca's too, they shrugged. How? What are Luca's questions? Hugo asked. For the past few years, rifts have been popping up more frequently. Some are in locations we've never charted one. For all we know about rifts and tuning, we can't explain the new occurrences. Who knew there was still so much to figure out, I said. From the tech world, the rules were pretty set, and what they tell you about the multiverse is pretty consistent. So we all thought. But then we lost 345G HB and 346 BGK, Kiki said, with a glint in their eye. In 2012, an A-class universe, 345 BGH and 346 BGK collided, forming one universe. The theories around it are conspiratorial. Some say it was because of a baseball team in one universe defied statistical probability and won the World Series. Some say it was because the other verse elected an unlikely president. Either way, we weren't allowed to talk about it. So everyone talked about it. It was treated like a black spot on the reputation of MVP because it couldn't be predicted or prevented. Multiverse collapse happens, Hugo said. I forgot, some people also say it's just the natural order of the universes. I can't even imagine the chaos that's in 346 BGH still, Tamar said. We toasted our relief at not having to be involved with that verse very often. Hugo looked around and then said softly, I think we should work on Luca's question, but I think we need to be careful. Why? Tamar asked. Hugo looked at her, his gaze steady, because if MVP wanted it researched, they'd put a team on it. We work for them, and that's the end of it. It didn't feel like the end of it, but I didn't say anything. Hey, Luca said, stepping up. Luca, Kiki said, shrugging off the tension. They draped their arm around him. What's your take on 345 BGH and 346 BGK? It was baseball all the way. Kiki practically shrieked. How can you say that? The president. I watched them argue. Tex had crews we worked on, and we were generally isolated. I hadn't felt close to anyone I worked with in years. My connections were always outside MVP, back home with my parents and my brother and sister. I had a few friends back there too, but no one I kept in touch with. I had even considered a chance with Titus, but that was over. My people believed I worked in the special division of the FBI and that I traveled a lot and was sworn to secrecy. Occasionally, I would watch a true crime TV show in some other verse and go home and tell my family the story and pretend it was part of the work I was doing. Looking around the lab, however, I felt a part of something. Wei and Hugo were talking at the food table. Mason was investigating the piano. Tamara and Kiki were facing off against Luca, who stood alone defending the baseball side of the debate. Then all three turned to me. Martin, Luca said. What? Which do you think it was? Kiki said. I laughed. I think it was the actor winning his first Oscar. They erupted. How? That's the least surprising thing. Martin, be serious. I laughed. It's the only thing that happened in both universes. They just bombarded me with evidence against it. I laughed so much, my eyes watered. So, in case you weren't sure, that was about the multiverse. One Verse Multi is a science fiction story about Martin King and his found family of crewmates and office mates working on solving a very interesting mystery in the multiverse. And that's my reading.
All right. Thank you, Sander. Loved it. Very energetic, and definitely loved the whole party scene vibe and the debate vibe and things like that in that scene. My question for you is, I really appreciate how your novels really explore and push intersections and boundaries of identity, whether it's Black, gay, trans, polyamory, self-discovery, and discovering oneself later in life. What inspires you to explore these identities in your writing?
Yes, I feel like the most obvious answer is myself. I am very intersectional, so I'm Black, trans, Hispanic. I did discover myself at a much older age. I'm older than I look. We don't have to tell you how old though. And I have also been primarily in multiracial or interracial relationships. My partner is polyamorous, so there's multiple people in my life. So all of these things sort of come together. And what I found that even as a child, I was picking pieces out of books to sort of wrap my duplicitous identities around. So it was like, oh, from here, I relate to the Blackness. And then from here, I relate to the Hispanicness. And then from here, I relate to the transness. And then I was like, how do you get all of these together? And how do you focus on something that feels like a complete person and not necessarily the selling of identities, while also telling a great story? And I was like, well, I can do that. So I gave it a shot.
And what a shot you gave. And I saw the compliment in the chat about that being one of the best covers ever. And I have to agree. And for those of you who are, viewing us, please hit that chat or go to the Bold Strokes Books website right now and take a look at all of the books and projects by all of the authors who are here today. And so what I'd like to invite is everyone to come back onto the screen right now. We're going to do some Q&A and panel and things like that. Just want to introduce myself again. My name is Frederick Smith, he, him pronouns. I'm an author on Bold Strokes Books. I have 3 titles. I'm not going to be reading today, but you can also check out Play It Forward in case you forgot, and Busy Ain't the Half of It. All of them are romance set in the city of Los Angeles. And I encourage you to take a look, and all feature characters of color, which fits in with the theme of tonight's reading. And so definitely wanted to check with all of you. First of all, our voices and people and BIPOC authors, and this panel is designed to raise the profiles of BIPOC authors on the label, with our author colleagues and with readers. When you think about our voices and your voice as a writer of color, as a writer of various identities, intersecting identities, what is it that you will want readers and potential readers, author colleagues, bookstagrammers, book talk, etc., to know about you and your unique voice that you bring to the canon of literature? And we could either do it by me calling on someone, or you all can just unmute yourself and just actually, I'd rather not call on people because I know I don't want to put people on the spot. So, yeah, what comes up for you when you think about our voices and your unique voice and what you're adding to the canon of literature for LGBTQIA plus community? So, Anne, yeah.
I thought it was important for me and to make sure that not only our voices, but our faces are seen. I try and ensure that at least most of my covers have African-American character or African-American couple. I am really like, very, very much determined about that. and there are a few covers that haven't made it, that to that level but I try, as you can see, make sure that we're represented. And I think representation is very important, especially in the LGBTQIA plus BIPOC community. I think that a lot of the faces that are out there representing the LGBTQIA community are non-BIPOC people. I think those are a lot of the main people. I think it's now recently starting to pick up where we have a lot more BIPOC trans, a lot more BIPOC queer, a lot more BIPOC gay and lesbian actors, performers, entertainers, whatever, now stepping forward and saying, this is us, this is who we are, and telling more of our stories. But I feel it's important that not only are our stories told, but our faces are seen, so that when someone walks into the store, they look at that cover and they see themselves and they say, okay, obviously this is a story about someone like me. And then they're able to, pick it up, look at the blurb and say, okay, I'm going to get this because I can equate with this character. So that's why I think it's important for us.
Thank you, Anne. Would anyone else like to build upon what Anne was sharing?
Sure. So I think for me, the importance of this is, I think sometimes in the nuance. And so I think that growing up and approaching, like I didn't grow up in a Black community. I grew up in mostly white and Hispanic community. And while my Hispanic identity was relatively fulfilled in that, I spent a lot of time like reaching to other sources for what Blackness might be. And I feel like for a while in terms of like middle school and high school, it came across as pop culture. So like there was this sort of universal Blackness that somebody had to approach. And then as I transitioned and as I came out, I feel like there's a very visible side to trans identities, and then a sort of a less visible side. And I identified more with the less visible side, and being a trans man of color. And so I was like, I'm sort of tired of reaching, and I know I don't believe I'm unique in to think that I'm the only one reaching. So I definitely think there's a lot of people out there saying, please let me just have something that touches that one thing that I needed, and so I think that's part of what we all bring in our respective ways, especially as those identities tally and as those experiences overlap. So that's why it's important to me.
Andrew or Lauren, Melissa, would you like to add on to that? The importance of our voices and what you add to the canon?
I'd like to, oh, sorry, Andrew. So we muted at the same time.
I knew it would. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I was just going to add to the conversation that I typically write neurodivergent characters. Sometimes their neurodivergence is explicitly stated, and sometimes it is something that is not yet diagnosed for that individual. And in my story, I wasn't diagnosed until late. I feel like that's really important to also have these stories where it's not named but still present. But I think in particularly thinking about BIPOC communities, neurodivergence, autism, mental health conditions, sometimes there's not as much space to have those conversations because, and I can speak from my own personal experience, my mom, she didn't want to seek a diagnosis for me of autism because she was so concerned about me being a young Black multiracial girl in the school system. She wanted to try to wait it out as much as she could. And of course, I would have wanted to know, but I don't blame her for that at all. And I think having that experience and stories and having that representation and having those conversations to destigmatize some of these things for a variety of reasons that stigmatized is something that I really want to lift in communities of color and for neurodivergent BIPOC teens.
I just like to add that, a lot of my stories are based in the past with younger versions of me or other LGBTQIA characters and individuals. So I think what I try to represent within all of that is these are really American stories. These are Americans, and the history really represents the history of America. So I'm particularly focusing on family stories in my next collection, which I'm still working on. It's a bit in the future. But a part of that is really the idea that, I have family members who came from Mexico generations ago. And then I have family members who were in the United States before the Mexican secession or the Gadsden Purchase. So, this is American history. These represent American voices. And it's still going on today with everything that's going on around the border. So we have to think of this country and the diversity within it, particularly when it comes to our history as Americans. What does that mean? It means many voices coming from different places around the world, even today.
Thank you so much. It's so true what all of you are sharing. And I really appreciate everything you're sharing about both visible and invisible identities and stories that people may or may not be thinking about. And so I will just echo and build upon what all of you said is that, all of your stories, all of our stories really add to how people can see the possibilities of themselves in literature and everything. So thank you so much. A question in the chat from Alexis that this is your chance to brag on yourselves. The question was for a new reader who might be new to you as an author, just discovering you today, which one of your works would you recommend to them to purchase or read or borrow, and why? So this is your time to kind of brag, be like, yeah, I wrote that, and this is why I want you to read it. Andrew, would you like to go first?
I can start. I just have one book available on Bold Stroke Books. I'm still in the process of putting 3 together right now, so hopefully they'll come together soon. But mine's a collection of short stories. It's really is like I said, it's entertaining. It's a quick read. I think it really does represent underrepresented voices in the United States, particularly Latin American voices and stuff like that. So that's what I have.
All right, it's bragging time. What would you recommend to a new reader who's just discovering you?
I can go next. I would suggest starting with the first one, and that's Fem Tales. So start with my first one. And then I would also suggest getting In Our Words. So, which is queer stories from Black, Indigenous, and people of color writers, just to support, our community and support, some of the authors that have added to this book. So, but for myself personally, Fem Tales, I think start with the first one. Why not?
Okay.
Best way to go.
Tell us what Fem Tales is about.
So
I know the title, but tell us.
Fem Tales is it's a trilogy. It's a book with 3 stories based on 3 fairy tales. The first one is called Beast, and they're contemporary. based on Beauty and the Beast storyline. The second is Awaken, based on Sleeping Beauty. And the last one's called Stiletto, based on Cinderella. And they're little spicy stories. So be prepared to have some little hotness with your sweetness.
Right. Thank you. Either Sandra or Lauren, Melissa.
Can go. It's kind of like Andrew. I have one book available on Bolt's Books right now. The other is available for pre-order. A Boy at the Window, and it's about a biracial white and Korean American teen in high school who has depersonalization, derealization condition, and copes with a lot of the stresses that he has kind of kept hidden through daydreaming constantly about Peter Pan's Neverland. And he goes to a new school and meets a boy on the track team on the cross country team. Daniel would be so mad at me for saying track instead of cross country. I'm so sorry to my own protagonists on the cross country team, who might be the person to join Daniel in his Neverland or break him free.
All right. Thank you for that. Sandra.
I do have to say, everyone's book here is on my list, and I'm so excited because now I've heard some of them too. I feel like I'm going to really brag, and I'm going to say I feel like my first novel brags for itself. Best of the Wrong Reasons was nominated for a Lambda Literary Award. It did not win, but it was nominated. So, and then I am absolutely, I think, I have two settings when I read and when I write, and that is romance and sci-fi. So I was very excited for One Verse Multi. I am a nerd and I am a scientist, and it comes out in there. So if you want just a nerdy band of scientists running amok across several universes, that's for you. And then The Speed of Slow Changes is coming out, like I said, in February, and I found more of myself in that one than I expected to. So if you pick it up and look for me in there, let me know what you find. I'd be curious.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. And I'll chime in on this one. This will be the only question that I chime in on. I think I would recommend, in case you forgot, my title, co-written with Chaz Lamar Cruz. And it is a story of love, loss, romance, discovery, set in West Hollywood, which is the neighborhood of Los Angeles. And it's a lot of fun. And we had a really great time writing it together on Bold Strokes Books. So yeah, check that out. So two questions that I have. So I'm going to ask one holiday question in a minute, but I also know that we also have some aspiring writers in the audience tonight or today, whenever you're watching it. And just wanted to know if, like, what is a piece of writing advice you would give to someone who is aspiring to be published, whether it's with Bold Strokes Books, whether it's self-publishing, or however they choose to do it? What's either one piece of advice you would offer, or what is one writing tip that works for you in terms of getting your story together? Like, is there a time of day or whatever? So I want to leave it open-ended. What would you offer to an aspiring author and writer?
I guess I'll go again. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there. You may not think if you're like me, you're a perfectionist, and you get imposter syndrome, and you don't think your story is as good as other people may think it is, or you feel like you may need a little push to get you in the right direction. Submitting your manuscript could actually get you there. It may not be quite ready yet, but Bolstroke Books or whomever you decide to submit it to can help get you there. If they don't, then you're not with the right publisher. But don't be afraid to put yourself out there.
I could go next. I feel like the thing that has changed my writing, and this is sort of a more logistical advice, is find how you like to write. So I tend to, I am not a plotter. So I tend to go with whatever inspiration comes to me when it comes to me. And I found I don't work very well on paper. It makes me nervous to have pages and ink and pen. So I write better on my computer. With that, I also pick the most ridiculous font. Sometimes it's like that old English just to feel fancy. And sometimes I write on my phone. I've seen people who sticky note. So I think if you sit down at a computer and it's not working for you, try something else. Because just because the end result is something you submit digitally most of the time, that doesn't mean that it has to start there.
Anyone else have a writer tip or yeah?
Yeah, the only thing I would say is I think the most surprising thing for me was I dedicated a certain amount of my day every day to writing. And then when I was done, I kind of knew I was done with the book and I was just ready to, then I had to dedicate that time to finding a publisher. And I thought it would be like easier than it was. And it wasn't. It became just as much work to find a publisher and keep putting it out there and deal with all the disappointment and the rejection. I was rejected by everybody in the world, it felt like, before I came across Bold Stroke Books or I answered their call for, book submissions. So, I think that's something you need to kind of give into. Publishing takes work as well. So you'll work as a writer, you work in, making your craft stronger and stronger. But then there's also a significant amount of work that goes into getting published, playing the game, give them what they want, write the synopsis, do the cover letter, stuff like that. So I think you really need to prepare for that.
I think from my personal experience and the way that I personally write, I think a big thing that changed me as a writer was accepting the editing process as like something that's actually really freeing. As in, that means the first time I write my story, it does not need to be pretty and it does not need to be done. And that first time is for me to explore and to get my ideas down and piece that story together. And if I can accept the fact that I will need to read the story aloud from top to bottom and then read it silently from top to bottom, then that really helps me to just write it all out and get the whole first draft, drafty draft actually done. And then maybe that's because I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. So when I get to let that go, it feels really great.
And just a quick curiosity for everyone here. I heard some of you allude to the fact that some of you work full-time jobs, some of you may be full-time writers. Talk to us about that balance between, maybe your desire to be a full-time author, but also having a full-time career or job or something that's not writing. How do you balance that and manage productivity?
I'll go first on this one. I work full-time. I work the full 40 and I spend a lot of time writing when I can. So I'm the type who will have, I actually do write quite a bit on my phone just because, systems can talk to each other and it makes it really easy, but I'll be sitting on the couch, just like in between, getting home and making dinner or right before bed, that sort of thing. And then a lot on the weekends. And I think that, I'm not going to say I do this, but downtime at work also can be very helpful if you're that person. And especially because even if you work 40 hours, 50 hours, 60 hours, 10 hours, sometimes work isn't happening. And so you got 5 minutes, you got 10 minutes, you got a break, you got a lunch, that sort of thing. If you're feeling inspired, go for it.
All right, thank you. Anyone else on the balance between writing career and other careers?
Yeah, so I work full time as well. And I think one thing that makes it helpful in a way is that I work in the field of autism. So I work in like I guess like I don't know how to explain it, so I'm not even going to, but I work in the field of autism and I work with neurodivergent folks and consult with a lot of situations that involve neurodiversity. And that drastically informs what I'm passionate about writing. And so in a way, my work is research for my writing, but also I do find that it can be sometimes difficult to find time to write. But I think to me, it's like writing is something that I really enjoy and something that helps me to express myself. And whereas at work, sometimes I'm not expressing myself, I'm expressing what I'm supposed to be, how I'm supposed to be expressing myself. But in my stories, I can just let it all go. And so it can be very cathartic and helpful.
Thank you.
I think for me, it's taken a long time, but I've built the writing into my career. So I've been running programs for a long, long time, and then I became a professor. So I teach writing. So it became an expectation that I write and publish too, which is a big benefit to my job. Because when I do have downtime, the expectation is that I write. And as soon as I started publishing, it kind of made me more, I don't know, it made me eligible for promotion and stuff along those lines. So I really built it into my career. It took me a while. I didn't know what a professor was when I was a kid. It never occurred to me to get a PhD or to become a college professor. But now, as I go along, it makes sense now. And really, it's a part of the expectation of my full-time job.
I too work in higher education. We're in finals week right now. I'm looking forward to using winter break to get some writing in. And what about you? I know you already said you're at your workstation and your reading station. Talk to us about your balance between writing career and outside writing career.
I would eventually like to, I do work full-time job, as I mentioned. So I try and write when I can. I used to think I wanted to be a full-time writer, but I think not a full-time writer to the point where that's all I do. I would love to be able to, my goal is to retire, open up my bed and breakfast and, to have one of those things. I'm having my bed and breakfast, I'm running my bed and breakfast, and I'm also doing my writing. So that's, that's my ultimate goal, to become somewhat of a full-time writer, but also doing something I'm passionate about. So having the writing and the bed and breakfast and taking my two passions and combining them would just be heaven. So
That sounds wonderful. Maybe a bed and breakfast for authors and writers.
yes,
And
that's
do
the
writing
goal.
retreats. Yeah. Oh, that sounds really nice. So at the time that we're recording this, because we know people could be watching this at any time of the year, but the time we're recording this happens to be during what some people call the winter holiday time or the winter break time, however you define holidays and winter break. And so 2 questions relate to holidays, just to kind of fit with the theme and the time of the year. What is your favorite holiday of the year, and what comes up for you when you think about that holiday? And then after you share that, I then want to dive into the idea of found family and what that can mean for queer communities during what we call holidays. And those holidays can be at any point of the year as well. So one, what is your favorite holiday of the year? And if it's your birthday, you can say that too. And then also talk to us about this idea of found family and what it means either to you or to the people who you know when it comes time to thinking about spending time together with the people who you were either raised with as guardians or the people who you have found in your life and you choose to spend time with them. And so anyone can go first who would like to go.
I'll go first. So I think these days, my favorite holiday is really becoming Thanksgiving. So I think Christmas is a little stressful. It's a bit too much, but Thanksgiving has become like a relaxed thing at my house because either my husband cooks or I cook. So if he cooks, it's traditional and it's Southern, but if I cook, it's Mexican. And, we can have mole, or I'll be doing enchiladas for Christmas this time. So the cooking and the sharing of the activity has become really fun over the years. And I love the Macy's Day Parade and the dog show and stuff like that. But I think as far as found family, I think an interesting part of my holidays now is I'm a notorious karaoke singer here in Tucson. So I can generally be found Saturday nights in the local bar singing karaoke because it really helps me with my stress, and I just love to sing. So that has evolved into a family of karaoke singers. So we all get together and we celebrate Christmas actually a week before the holiday together and exchange gifts and stuff like that. So that's my found family. And the interesting thing is I've had them for a while. So when my parents were alive, my parents eventually started coming to the gay bar with me and be part of the found family. So the found family actually included my actual family. And I never thought in my life I would ever get my parents into a gay bar or let alone slow dance to me singing songs. So that's actually happened. And then I have this family around it. So it includes my real family and my found family at these holidays or these celebrations throughout the year. So that's been cool.
My favorite holiday has will always be has been and will always be Halloween. I absolutely love that holiday. I think it's the one day of the year where people can really, ironically, by wearing costumes, be themselves. And I love it and I enjoy it. And I used to throw Halloween parties all the time. I still plan to do that now that I'm more settled again. And I think it's funny because I hear people say like, it's the most hedonistic holiday. And I'm like, no, it's like the holiday of like joy and celebration. And they're like, aren't you talking about Christmas? And I'm like, no. But yeah, I just absolutely love that day. And thinking about found family and holidays, I think kind of like what Andrew was mentioning, some holidays can have been very stressful in my life, and getting to create new traditions on those holidays with found family has allowed me to re-engage and enjoy those days. Holidays are actually something that I really like because I love having things to celebrate, but it does require people with whom I feel safe to celebrate. And so being with my found family and inviting people in who I have friends who maybe they're not close with their family, but taking the time to be like, come over on Christmas, like it doesn't need to just be me and my partner, I think is something that I absolutely love doing. And yeah, I guess that's it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I'm like Lord Melissa. Halloween is my favorite. If you let me, I know my first year at my current job, they usually have this big competition, Halloween competition, decorating competition, and they said, we don't feel like doing it this year. Would you like to do it? I said, ha. It turned into a whole bloody, gory campsite, creatures falling. It was amazing. But I also believe it's a time for people to kind of, bring out their inner child and to have fun and like Laura Melissa said, be themselves. It's amazing how much of yourself that you are in a costume. It allows you to kind of like step out of the norm and be a little different. Found family and holidays. I recently literally found family through ancestry.com and had them over for it. So this Thanksgiving was my first Thanksgiving with them, and we had Christmas together last year. So it's amazing how we've connected in such a way that it's like we've known each other forever. And even though we just met a year ago. So I think when it comes to found family, it's a little different for me. I also have found family within this community itself since I've started writing. I felt more comfortable in my own skin with this newfound writing community. So I guess I have a twofold kind of found family situation. But Thanksgiving is always the one holiday I feel like you can come together with new and old and just bring everyone together and feel all the love and the warmth of togetherness.
Right. Thank you for that. And I really appreciate you sharing the story about your new literal found family too. I bet that was really both moving and exciting to connect with people who are connected to you. Sander.
So I tried to find a holiday sweater. I live in Fort Lauderdale, so fortunately this is an air conditioning vent. I'm fine. It's not too hot. My favorite holiday, this is going to be kind of wild, is the 4th of July. And I love tacky things. Like I love things that are outlandish and sort of cringy and loud in a holiday. Like parades, yes. Baseball games, absolutely. Fireworks, 100%. I love any holiday that supports eating hot dogs. So the 4th of July just is everything. And then I actually really resonated with something Andrew said about the American story. And I've always felt like when I celebrate the 4th of July, it's not even just about the role the people who make up my ancestry play in this country. Because talk about found families, this is a found country for most of one side of my family. And then it's my other side of the family was here before it was America. And so if anyone was screaming for independence, it'd be an assortment of my identities. And so I like to get very patriotic on that day. And I have the most obnoxious red, white, and blue gear I wear, and I have the worst t-shirt. It annoys everybody and I love it. And even that tends to bleed into some other holidays. So one of our Thanksgiving traditions in my found family is we watch Independence Day, the Will Smith movie on Thanksgiving Day. It is a Thanksgiving movie. Try it one year. It'll change your life. I don't know. It just is. So that is my favorite holiday. And then I'm not big on the other holidays just because I feel like for me, Christmas never felt like this idea of Christmas that they sell you of like packages under trees and toys and stockings, and Santa felt like it was for other kids. It felt like it was for white kids or rich kids or kids in a city with fireplaces and not kids in the country suburbs with, 17 cousins, So the holidays, some of the other holidays never quite felt real, but one thing I've liked and enjoyed by being able to be a part of the community is now I have new holidays. So like Pride is something that I get to explore and get to invest in and get to go out for, although I'm not very great at the rainbow thing, but I can rock an American flag. And then, so like there's new holidays, Trans Day of Remembrance, there's holidays we make up or traditions we make up, like I said, watching Independence Day on Thanksgiving. So, and that makes it feel more real to me because it had me at the start, and it wasn't just something that someone handed me sorry for the pun, pre-packaged as this is your holiday. And so, yeah, that's my the 4th of July.
All right. Thank you. I enjoy hearing all of your stories about your favorite holidays and what found family means to you and everything. As we get ready to conclude this live event or the recorded event, if you're watching it recorded later, I want to give each one of you all an opportunity to kind of, I don't know, bring it home for you, either something you'd like to share with the people who are watching about you, about your work, or even about what being part of Bold Strokes Books means to you. as an author and as a person. So this is kind of final statement for everyone. We can start with whoever would like to share a final statement, thought, word, or anything about themselves. And for those of you who are watching, we want to thank you for your time today. We know that you could be spending your time with many things, streaming, TV, family, found family, going out. So thank you for your time. Please click on the links in the chat. Please share this with your friends and your found family, and or think about ways in which you can buy, read, borrow, or gift any of the projects by anyone who's here with us today. But yeah, final statements, final comments from anyone.
Okay. First, Bold Stroke Books is awesome. I had this idea and they took it and ran with it. I appreciate all of you for participating. This is awesome. I think my final thoughts would be, whether you're BIPOC or not, pick up a book by a BIPOC author, gift a book to someone by a BIPOC author, support the community any way you can, be an ally. If you're queer, if you're not queer, if you're whatever, buy a book by these people and support the community, and make sure that you are not just talking up a good game and not supporting us. And I thought being with Bold Stroke Books has just been awesome. I couldn't imagine having been with anyone else, spent the past couple of years with anyone else, having the pleasure of putting my books out with a community that cares about you, about your writing, and is willing to take the time to shape you and form you. So new authors out there, don't be afraid to step up and submit to Bold Stroke Books if you're looking for someone. And that's it. But once again, thank you guys for participating, and thank you everyone else for attending. You're all great.
All right. Thank you. And thank you, Anne, for bringing this idea to Bold Strokes Books. Very much needed, necessary, and wonderful. Final thoughts or statements from anyone else on the panel?
So I'll go. I'd just like to say, as a Mexican-American author, it's been great to be a part of Bold Stroke Books and this community and stuff like that. My other community, or my work community, higher education, has not always been supportive of me because my culture, my food, my background, my Spanglish always ends up in my stories. And for many, many years, there were quite a few professors and individuals who discouraged me from doing that, to not be so bold as to include elements like that about myself in my own stories. So when the main message was always write what you know. So that was a little difficult. So it's great to be a part of a community and to be able to feel free to express myself the way I want to express myself, being a part of Bold Stroke Books and, being acknowledged as a person of color, as one of their authors. It's great. It's been a great community. So I want to thank everybody too for being here and supporting this day. Good idea, Anne, for putting this together. I hope we can do it again soon.
Yeah, I can tag along with that. Thank you to Bold Strokes Books for taking on a really wild story about a boy running cross country and thinking about flying in Neverland at the same time. Thank you. And it's been great to work here and to even be able to be at an event like this. Thank you, Anne, and thank you everyone for letting me join in. But I think final words in terms of BIPOC and own voices. I want to say that to me, it is wonderful to be able to put out books about multiracial individuals and to have the story be not centered around that person needing to choose a side. I think that that's what I usually read or have read. And so I'm very grateful to Bold Strokes to have an opportunity to share the story of what it's like to be multiracial, be it on Boy at the Window, be it or again, Mix and Glamour. and to have that be an identity in and of itself.
I'd like to conclude by saying thank you to everyone who has written and anyone who will write. I think that the one of the most important things we can do is seize the opportunity to get our stories heard. And I think that Bold Strokes Books has welcomed myself and others so wholeheartedly that they've made that journey substantially less terrifying, because I was horrified. I was like, oh no. But they made it great. And then I think also the fact that there's other authors who, even just here on this panel, who have a story to tell that is relatable and approachable and beautiful. And I just reflect a lot on how, even in my lifetime, opportunity to tell some of these stories was limited. And I think that with the opportunity where it's at right now, and even with people trying to ruin that opportunity, I think we got to keep pushing for more stories. So thank you to those who helped pave the way. Thank you to everyone currently writing. And I look forward to reading those who will write in the future.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Andrew and Lauren, Melissa, and Sandra for being here today. Thank you, Bold Strokes Books, and Sandy and everyone else behind the BSB team for supporting us. And thank you all who are watching us, whether you're watching us live or watching us recorded at a later date. We appreciate you, your readership, and your support. You help us be better writers and better people for you. So thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day, and take care of yourself and take care of the people around you. Bye-bye.